All right, my friends, today I want to talk about Benjamin Franklin. What an extraordinary man he was. When I say his name, you see his face in your mind's eye, don't you? And you think about things like his key and his kite experiment, the fact that he was a printer, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, an ambassador, a diplomat. He considered himself somewhat of a musical scientist. He wore many hats. He did many things. In fact, when he was very young, he was an expert swimmer, a lifeguard in a sense, and he gave private swimming lessons in a time when most people didn't even know how to swim. He was a doer. He was somebody who was interested in many, many things, and I just can't believe the amount of accomplishments he's had in his life. I mean, if he had been solely a signer of the Declaration of Independence, we'd probably be talking about him. But he was a very brilliant man. And if you've never read his autobiography, you should. It's somewhat incomplete, but it's nevertheless very interesting. And so when I was at the Oxford Exchange in Tampa, it's a really neat bookstore / gift shop, restaurant. It's really, really cool. I picked up a book in there called Ben and Me by Eric Weiner. And it's really, really good. It's a very good book, easy to read, but he talks about how he's somewhat envious of Benjamin Franklin. He wants to know how he can be a little bit more like him. Well, I want to talk about that a little bit, how we can be a little bit more like Benjamin Franklin. Now, we don't want to be just like someone else. We don't want to be a carbon copy, but we want to take away some of the positive aspects, attributes, characteristics of another individual whenever we can. And since he's such a highlighted person in history, why not take a look at him? So, you know, he's a person who did so many different things, wore so many different hats. You have to know that he probably failed a lot. Yes, I know there's a dog barking in the back of me. This location was kind of a last second decision, so hopefully it won't be too disturbing. But we're probably going to have to listen to him. But obviously he would have had to have failed a lot, because when you do that many different things, you can't have done all of them long enough to be expert level. But he seemed to be quite proficient. And one of the things that he did that was quite remarkable and quite earth-shattering at that time was he changed from being a British loyalist to an American rebel at 69 years old. 69 years old. That was a chance that was actually life-threatening. The British government tried to hunt him down and hang him, but he escaped their grasp a few times. And so he's a guy who took chances. He took chances on many things, and he's very witty too, by the way. You know, that's if you have ever had the privilege of having Poor Richard's Almanac, which I haven't, but I've seen different things from it. You'll know that he wrote that under a pseudonym, which he often did, even from a very young age. He wrote things under a pseudonym, and people relied on that book. In Pennsylvania homes during colonial times, they generally only had 2 books in the home, and that was the Bible and Poor Richard's Almanac. That's how prolific he was. Well, anyway, so he failed often, and he was often confronted with setbacks, but he never abandoned his ideas. So if he had an idea in his head, he just went with it. He just tried it. If something crossed his mind, he said, you know, I'm going to see if that would work. I don't know if it will or not, but I'd like to find out. I'd like to find out what the chances are. And you know, that's one of the takeaways I believe that we can all benefit from is how many different things do you try? You know, growing up, one of the things I was always annoyed with when my dad got together with friends, even when I was a young adult and guys got together, they were still doing this, but the only thing they would ever talk about was fishing, hunting, and work. And that was it. That was completely it. And I thought, what a boring life that is, if that's all you can talk about. But it's important to be interested in many different things and have that curious mind where we wonder what we could possibly do with that. And so, you know, I think if Franklin didn't let failure discourage him, we could learn from that. But I think there's another aspect of Franklin that I really admire a lot. In this chapter, in chapter 13, I'm just going to read a little bit of it for you here real quick. It's easy to understand. It's not deep. So stick around. Do not turn this video off. Just listen carefully, because I think you're going to like this. Okay, so in chapter 13, the title of it is called Textual Ben. It's about his life as a printer. He started printing at a very young age because his older brother was a printer, and they did not get along, but Ben became very good at it. It's one of the things he was known for his entire life was a printer. Even though he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, I think his gravestone even says that he was a printer. I don't think it highlights the fact that he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, but does that he was a printer, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure of that. Anyway, so here's how this chapter goes at first, and listen very carefully. Benjamin Franklin loved words. He loved how they felt in his printer's composing tray, and how they looked on the printed page, and how they sounded on the lips of great orators like the preacher George Whitefield. He loved the musicality of words. Here Skug lies snug as a bug in a rug. I probably didn't read that as poetically as I could have, but anyway, he wrote to young Georgiana Shipley when her pet squirrel Mungo, a gift from Ben, met an untimely demise. Yeah, he gave a girl a pet squirrel. He invented words too, mostly electrical terms, but also everyday ones like mileage and fellow man and magical circle and power of attorney. We got those from him. We got a lot of words from him, actually. He also loved the money that words yielded. Franklin, unlike most wealthy people of his time, owed his small fortune not to gold or tobacco or land speculation, but to words. Let me tell you something, that right there is a risky venture in a time when agriculture was just what you did. That's how you sustained yourself. He relied on words. A brilliant man. From a young age, Ben wore the printer title proudly and continued to do so even once he had become internationally renowned, occasionally signing documents simply B. Franklin, printer. He began printing at age 12 and continued well into his 70s when, as U.S. representative to France, he set up a small press at his residence in the village of Passy. There he printed everything from quirky bagatelles to the first U.S. passports, to a copy of the peace treaty he helped negotiate with Britain. So next time you look at your passport, realize that Benjamin Franklin was the first one to print those. For Franklin, printing was more than a profession or a business. It was an art, a calling, and a force for good in the world. It was a way of seeing the world, too. Franklin, like all printers, had to compose the type backward and upside down. He grew accustomed to altered perspectives. I had an older friend who has passed away. Now it's been a few years. He lived well into his 80s, and he had an interest in many things too. And one of them was a printing press. And I don't know if I had one, but he was telling me all about printing presses. But yeah, I'm sure he did, because he was talking about how I should come over and look at his. But it was like an old printing press where you had to take the print, wherever you were printing, you had to compose it backwards, and the letters had to be upside down. And so that was interesting to me. He didn't know if I knew that or not, which I did not. But they bring this back up here. They make it a point. The author makes it a point in this article that Benjamin Franklin was able to consider altered perspectives because he was accustomed to putting things in upside down and backwards. In fact, even though he was a British loyalist that turned American, his son, I can't remember his son's name, but his son became a governor of, I believe it was, was it Maryland? Or it was one of those New England states. And his son and him were at odds with each other for the rest of their lives, because his son remained a British loyalist. It was just shocking to either one that they would assume the political stance that they would. But Benjamin Franklin was able to adjust his stance and consider different perspectives because of his printing experience. This is what I want to convey to you. You know, we all have opinions. We all have staunch beliefs. We all have certain ways of thinking that we believe are right. And I'm not here to encourage you that you might be wrong. I'm not here to say that you are wrong. But what I do want to convey is that it is important to understand there are people who think differently than we do. And I know you know that. But one of the ways that we can communicate with others, and Benjamin Franklin was in the communication business, words were very important to him, but in the one of the ways of communicating with people is to consider their perspective. Because first of all, we might learn something. We might learn that A, we're wrong, or B, there's just a different way of thinking about something. So one of the ways we can do that, and this is what I've really tried to do in the past couple of years, is I've taken everything that I think and believe, not everything, but I've tried, as much as I can, as much as I'm conscious of. Oh, there's a church bell. You get to hear that while we're doing this. But take what you believe, think about the things that you believe and the things that you say, and think about them in a backwards fashion. Because that's how other people hear you sometimes. That's how they think compared to you. So what I try to do is I try to think of something that I really staunchly believe in, and I try to form an argument, every argument possible against what I believe, because I want to be prepared for the different ways that other people think. And that allows me to communicate with them in a meaningful way without being argumentative. It also gives me a chance to form my arguments in a way where I can actually not deconstruct, but turn my thoughts backwards and upside down so that they actually mean something to somebody else. In the end, when it's printed in their mind, it makes sense. Am I making sense now? I certainly hope so. Because it does mean a lot. It is a great way to approach things. Consider altered perspectives. Consider other people's perspectives, and consider turning yours on their head. It's very eye-opening. And it's another way we can learn to be a little bit more like Benjamin Franklin. We have things we can learn from all kinds of people in history, but old Ben, he's one of them. He's one of my favorites. I hope you've liked this. I'm going to leave a link for this book down in the description below. I highly suggest getting it, and it's a fun read. I hope you're enjoying the church bells. All right, guys, it's a beautiful day out here. I've got to get cranking. I'm glad you joined me. Now I have a helicopter. All sorts of noises around here. All right. Make sure you like this video, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Check the notification bell, make sure that's on so you can be apprised of my future uploads and watch them. All right. I'll catch you guys in the next one. In the meantime, be wise.